Hey King, how are you?
Good. So Neil, thanks for having me, and thanks for invitation to basically meet up virtually with all the friends in Israel.
Yes, the friends in Israel and all over the world. We are a Fintech week, and this is the second time we meet. I interviewed you also on the Fintech Nations Summit in September, and since then you had an amazing Fintech week yourself. So I congratulate you, and we're going to speak
Thank
about
you.
it and share all the data of how big it was. I understand it was one of the biggest events of the year for everybody, people like us in Fintech and finance. But before that, if you can give a little bit of a background about yourself so people get to know who you are and Invest Hong Kong, of course.
Sure. Well, so hello everyone. My name is King Leung, head of FinTech at Invest Hong Kong. So basically, Invest Hong Kong is a Hong Kong government's units in which our remit is to help also attract foreign direct investments. At the same time, we have these remits to help foster the fintech ecosystem in Hong Kong. So basically, anything from talking to the investors, the family offices, the large corporates, and the talent side, universities. So almost like anything under the sun related to fintech, we will have some sort of participation. Now,
Amazing.
so that's the sort of Invest Hong Kong side. Now, but then at the same time, I just want to just highlight a few things about the sort of exciting evolution, if you will, of the role that the Invest Hong Kong fintech team plays for Hong Kong over the past 5 years. Now, without getting into a lot of details, just perhaps use the size of the fintech week that we organize to put in perspective. Now, when the FinTech Week of Hong Kong first launched in the year 2016, so back then we had like 500 people attended, so pretty small. Now, the following year, I think we got something like 5,000. That's year two. So year three, we got 8,000. Year four, we got 12,000. And this year is the year five, which we had to go virtually because of the pandemic. And we decided to do it boldly by also reaching out to a lot of our new friends around the world. Because of the virtual aspect and the fact that we put a lot of energy, a lot of planning into it, we reached over 1.2 million
What?
viewers. Yes, 1.2 million people just joining in from
Wow.
over 130 economies around the world.
People
So that's
don't
why,
know this. It's crazy. Wow.
yeah, it
Wow.
is. Yeah, well, after we tally up all the numbers for the entire week of 5 days, I mean, we were like, wow. I mean, but then again, I think it's just probably just the right place at the right time. Obviously, pandemic make it I think way more acceptable to do this kind of events virtually. At the same time, we felt that now it's really a globalized world. So for Hong Kong, even though we are global international financial center, but we cannot be the best in everything, right? You got RegTech, the InsurTech. There's just so many different domains. So we feel that there are a lot of smart people around the world. So we would love to welcome folks from different countries. Of course, I think Israel being a very major source of innovation, we love to invite folks like you guys so that we are able to fill the gaps that is still in the market. The banks, the insurance companies, they're still going through this digital transformation process. So by having this big platform, the FinTech Week, we're able to pull a lot of sort of smart people together so that the buyers, the banks, the insurance, the asset managers, they now have more choices to look at all the latest and greatest.
Wow. This is amazing. You also had a lot of speakers from top-notch companies, banks, regulators, chief scientists, right?
Yes. Yeah, we are actually very privileged. Now, to start off, of course, people are very much intrigued about, I'm just sort of kind of like pick a few topics off the top of my head. Let's say CBDC, right? The central bank digital currency. Of course, I think a lot of central banks are really looking into it, but the one that kind of like way ahead of the pack is the central bank in mainland China. And leading that initiative is the governor of PBOC, the People's Bank of China, which is a central bank in China. So we had the privilege to invite the governor, Mr. Yi Gang, to speak at the Hong Kong FinTech Week to share with us about the direction of CBDC. So we're just extremely grateful because he doesn't give a lot of public speeches. And then we got from the commercial side, we got like Ray Dalio, the legendary investor. We got Jim Rogers, and then we got some amazing people, which is not the usual people you would associate with in a fintech events, like Ray Kurzweil, the
Wow.
futuristic
Yeah.
inventor. And so I think so we have people like that. And of course, we got I think a lot of the leading figures in banking, the global CEO of HSBC, global CEO with Standard Chartered, the global CIO with the Fidelity, the JP Morgan of the world. We got the global CEO of Fidelity. I mean, the names
Yeah.
just go on and on and on. So we had over 350 speakers from around the
Wow.
world.
Just imagine, yeah, I'm thinking about the hours of content that you provided to all these people, of course, the platforms and of course the meetings that took place during the FinTech week, right?
Yes. Yeah,
That's
we had I haven't seen the final tally, but there's just a lot of other satellite events. But the last week when we took a look at the numbers of some of the core sessions, we had over 100 hours of content.
wow.
So it's just to be honest, I haven't got a chance to watch all of them myself either.
Wow, that's amazing, and I'm very happy to also partner with you for the FinTech Week and the FinTech Nations Hackathon that we're going to announce, I guess, next year. And I think that the fact that you did such an amazing event, it's really something you build up. These relations, you build them up all the year long. I see you also
Yes.
in other nations. I see you personally participating also here, giving the time to for another interview, another Zoom, another webinar. And this is a work that all your team is doing throughout all the year, and that's why I'm seeing your logo everywhere in a good way. I'm saying in the relevant events, and it accumulates to a one big mega event, but it's a lot of work of a lot of people.
Yeah, well, again, the way that the mindsets that we have is that, again, it's a globalized world, and there's just a lot of really smart people. So for instance, there's a company, Home Credit, actually from Czech Republic, and they decided to come and sell in Hong Kong, and also doing really great work in mainland China. In fact, I think mainland China now accounted for something like 40% of their sales. But who would have thought, right? Like someone from Eastern Europe doing a lot of business in China successfully. So I think in a way, we just felt that there's a lot of really smart people around the world. So we would love to learn from other folks. And of course, I think our ecosystem is, even though we're only a city of 7.5 million population, but just because of the fact that we are an international financial center. So particularly for the fintech companies in the B2B space, selling solutions. Now, of course, I think we have over 160 plus banks, over 160 insurance companies, like 800 asset managers, a lot of cross-border payment transactions, so trade finance. So that's why I think the B2B soil or the amount of opportunities is actually pretty good. So that's why we are able to attract a lot of B2B players, in particular, to come to Hong Kong. Now, at the same time, as some folks, even in of course, Israel, Europe, US, folks have already picked up the news about the Greater Bay Area, which is the southern part of China, the Guangdong, and this sort of the integration of the economies based on this whole what we call the GBA, Greater Bay Area strategy from Beijing, the leadership in Beijing. So when the markets are sort of integrated, so part of the motivation for this is that obviously I think a lot of folks have been sort of watching the news that China is undergoing some major reform in the financial sector, and of course China being very cautious because of the huge population, so they would like to do it face by face. So that's why the GBA has been designated as the sort of like the sandbox for this sort of financial market opening up. So that's why in June of this year, the PBOC, again, the Central Bank of China, together with the three top regulators in China, they released a sort of like a policy direction paper back in June of this year, in which they laid out like 30 different areas where they would love to open up the whole markets. So the 30 areas include the usual suspect, right? The payments, the wealth management, the insurance, the banking. I mean, it's almost like everything you can think of around the financial services. Now, once that happens, because the population of GBA alone is 72 million people, and the GDP at the moment is 1.6 trillion. So that's the size, is roughly like Canada GDP. So for that little area in China. So that's why, again, I think even for the B2C guys are now taking notice. So they feel that this is a great way to sort of access the mainland China market in this sort of like GBA sandbox by sort of selling international financial products. So that's why there's been a lot of excitement, particularly over the past year.
Yeah, this is super important for people who are listening to us. Such an amazing opportunity over there. And this leads me to the second question, like, of course, the role that Invest Hong Kong has. Any opportunities in the region that you see and globally? I know it's a big topic, but let's start with maybe the virtual banks like we talked last time, and then we dive into your work as Invest Hong Kong.
Sure. Well, first of all, we have a lot of respect and admiration to our colleagues at HMA, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. And so they basically wear two hats. On the one hand, they're the banking regulators. On the other hand, they're also the de facto central bank for Hong Kong. So that's why they basically have a lot of influence over the financial sector in Hong Kong. Now, so obviously, if we sort of like went back about, let's say, 3-4 years ago, so the leaders back then at HMA, they saw that now while Hong Kong has been doing quite well, the stock market, the IPOs have been making a lot of international headline news, but then they felt that the fintech movement is really hitting the different markets around the world. In a way to kind of like accelerate that transformation of the whole financial sector in Hong Kong, the HMA made a very wise and bold decision to decide to launch the virtual bank license. And since then, of course, there've been some policy paper or research paper, white paper to sort of figure out what's the right size of initial granting of licenses that's appropriate. So after all that, a lot of thinking behind it. So they decided to give out 8 virtual banking licenses. Some people think, wow, wouldn't that be a bit too many in terms of the first wave of virtual banking licenses? But then we think about it because the motivation is to really use this as a catalyst to, in a way, inspire more innovation. So at the same time, the Hong Kong B2B or the banking sector is actually pretty large, 160 plus banks. Yeah. So adding another 8 is not a big problem if they have some unique service offering. Mm-hmm. So that's why now with the 8, actually, many of the shareholders behind, I think, majority of these virtual banks, they are the tech leaders from mainland China. The Alibaba, the Tencent, the Ping An, Xiaomi, and then JD.com, which is the equivalent of like Amazon in China. And then, of course, I think there's Zhong'an, which is the new kid on the block. It's the first digital insurer in China, making a lot of headlines as well. So in a way, there's just all these like new injection of energy and tech expertise and a financial muscle. So that's really sort of pushing the Hong Kong financial sector to the next level. Now, of course, I think the HMA folks, they don't just sit on their laurels. And so just this FinTech Week, literally like 2 weeks ago, so the CEO of HMA, Mr. Eddie Yu, he made an announcement that is also equally game-changing, and that is the launching of an initiative called CDI, so Commercial Data Interchange. So in other words, it's like a data exchange, if you will, that HMA would like to promote. Now, over the past at least 2-3 years, now I think for folks who have been following the UK, the EU, would know, right? The open banking, the PSD2, right? So that's a movement that has already started. And Hong Kong has been pretty close, in terms of the pace in launching it. Now, but then the one thing that is so central to the whole thing is to have the data that is not just within the banking sector, but ideally with also sectors outside banking, so that you can have access to consumer data of different profiles, this psychographics data, so that you can, in a way, have the whole 360-degree view of the whole sort of consumer persona, so that when you do offer financial products, assessing the risk, then you are having a much better chance to do a good job on debt protection.
Yeah.
So that is just so central. Now, from a business opportunity standpoint, you can imagine for any fintechs or even the tech startups that are in the sort of big data analytics, the modeling, open data areas, the open APIs. So there's just a lot of a huge amount of business opportunities that will be just popping up in Hong Kong over the next few years, starting with this CDI announcement.
That's huge. Can you just mention for people here who are watching us the if you remember all of the 8, or at least the one that was approved, because I want to give them the credit that these virtual banks.
Yep. Well, okay, I'll go by my memory. So not in any particular order, right? So of course the WeLab, the Hong Kong homegrown unicorn, and then you have ZA Bank, which is the parent company is Zhong'an from China, digital insurance, but now they came into banking. So ZA, and then Mox. So Mox Bank is the digital bank from Standard Chartered, and then Airstar. So Airstar is the joint venture between AMTD and Xiaomi from China, and a Power Bank. So Ping An One Connects, which is a huge, enormous, I think, tech capabilities, and also great company in mainland China as well. And then you also have Ant Bank, from the Alibaba, the Ant Group. You have Fusion Bank, from the Tencent family. So do you have 8? You have a name all 8 already?
In my mind, I counted 7, but
Okay.
yeah, I think you covered most of them. I wanted you to start with 4, but that's okay.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Yeah. So Airstar.
Amazing.
Oh yes. Okay. One more. Livi Bank.
Livi, of course. I knew this.
LIVI. Yeah,
Yeah, Livi.
LIVI, Livi Bank. Now, Livi Bank, I have to say a few words. First of all, I don't mean to forget them because it's an important player. So the Livi Bank is a very interesting one because it's a sort of combination of several formidable players. So there's the BOC, Bank of China. There's the JDD, which is the JD.com digital arm, which is very savvy on the fintech side. And then there's Jardine. So Jardines is a Hong Kong conglomerate that's been around for more than a century, and they have such an enormous sort of breadth and depth when it comes to, let's say, the retail presence, for example. So in supermarket, convenience store, the 7-Eleven, the IKEA. So that's why they have basically tentacles into many of the consumer-facing outlets. So from a sort of customer-facing or customer data or profile access standpoint, so they have an enormous reach. So Levy Bank, again, is a very interesting.
And a great team, is a great team over there, I have to say.
Yes. Yep.
So what are the opportunities that you see, and also the role that the Invest of Hong Kong? How would you do your job good, if
Yes.
I may ask you and your team?
Sure. Now, well, for us, we are like the oil. We are like the engine oil of an engine. So I just mentioned HMA again. Fintech is a regulated sector. So in many ways, kind of the whole to get the ball rolling. Oftentimes we start with the regulators announcing, like a new regulation to set the rules, and then the ball will start rolling. Now, but then while the HMA, the SFC, which is the Securities and Futures Commissions responsible for crypto exchange, for example, there's also the Insurance Authority, the Custom Excise Department. So there are a number of regulators in Hong Kong that do their bit, which is to sort of get the ball rolling. Now, but as the ball roll, initially there may be some friction that it doesn't roll as well as we like. So in a way that the way that we see Invest Hong Kong, we are like the engine oil. So in a way, we just put some grease to make the ball roll a bit faster. So that's why we would work very closely, for example, with the like family offices, the investors, because obviously that add even more oil, right? More ball bearings to make things roll more quickly. So just to put in perspective, there's an association in Hong Kong called HKVCA, so Hong Kong Venture Capital Association. And this is the longest established in terms of history of such VC PE association in Asia. I was told it's like the second oldest in the world. But in any case, they've been around for a long time. And there are a few hundred members. And when you add up the money managed by all these VCs, the angels, and the PEs all together, so the amount of money that they're managing is over 2 trillion US dollar. 2 trillion. Okay. Again, Hong Kong is a small city, but there's like more than 2 trillion of money.
Wow.
This is not even talking about IPOs. This is just the private investment. So that's why there's a lot of money in Hong Kong. Now, at the same time, I'm not even counting the family offices, in which there's a new association just set up literally just last week. Because in the past, the family offices just did their own thing, kind of independently. So some do deals together because they're friends, but by and large, so there wasn't like a sort of like industry effort to work together, so to speak. But because the Hong Kong government's led by our the Financial Services Ministry, we call FSDB, the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau, and also the private sector guys, they set up this family office association. So now they're gathering all the quiet, the ultra high net worth folks together. So just a few days ago, I met with just one of them, one of the family offices. Very modest guy. He's not even the tycoons that you saw on the headline news. Very low key and just very quiet. And I was like, well, okay. So actually, just out of curiosity, so how much money do you manage? Oh, don't mention it. We are not a huge player. We just manage just 1.5 billion US. I said, okay, so just 1.5 billion US. Okay, all right. So anyway, so from a funding standpoint, there's just a lot of money, and particularly, I mean, I'm sure this is the same for other parts of the world. A lot of these families, the rich, ultra high net worth families, they made the money from doing maybe manufacturing, right, textile, the more so-called traditional old economy stuff. So now they're passing the baton to second generation, third generation, and much like anywhere else in the world, the second, third generation may not want to carry on to run the family business. They want to do something more sexy, more cool, right? So now they want to invest in the sexy stuff, tech stuff. So that's why, but then they might not have the expertise because after all, they're not VCs by nature. So they're really just getting started to get more savvy in terms of understanding the fintech space, the INT, right, the AI, the robotics, and so on, the biotech. So that, I mean, it's just getting started. The money is there. The money is there. We just need the right projects. And by the way, these people, most of the time, these guys in the second, third generation, they were educated overseas, so very international minded. They're just more than happy. Invest a project in Israel, run in Switzerland, and other in UK, US, no problem.
This is amazing. Wow. And by the way, I don't hear it from you said that maybe it's common around the world, but gathering an ecosystem like this and involving them and educating them and everything that you said is super important. I don't see it necessarily in other ecosystems. So it's and by the way, we also have here the UAE, of course, because of the new relations of Israel and the UAE, and we have family offices during this week. And all of them are keen to learn, to collaborate. And as you said, it's a second generation that has the hunger to develop and create. And certainly in fintech, that's a blessing. I think we will see many more fruits of these collaborations.
Yeah, and then there's the crypto, right? So the crypto is another sort of sexy topic that the second generation, the third generation are very intrigued. So I think just to put perspective, the regulator in Hong Kong, SFC, they basically launched this regulation last year during the FinTech Week of 2019, in which they were basically announcing to the world the framework for giving out the crypto exchange license. And since then, the different organizations have applied, and one organization is called OSL under the BC Group has received the approval in principle. I think there's still some legal stuff to be ironed out, but then it's approval in principle. And I've heard that there are a number of others, pretty good players already, so waiting on the wings. Now, but why this is important? Because first of all, the SFC being one of the most respected regulators, they want to make sure that they can do it. They should do it right, the whole crypto space. So they want to lend legitimacy to this space. So that's why from a regulation side, they are giving this framework that in a way is has the same kind of vigor like regulating a securities firm. Okay, now but at the same time, because of that particular sort of flavor, right? The securities kind of backgrounds. So some of the tokens that are being encouraged is the security tokens. Now, and then so that leads to, I think, a number of things that I've been sort of meeting a lot of people, and they are very intrigued about doing business in Hong Kong, being traded on the crypto exchange when it's becoming available. Things like tokenizing properties, right? Now with the pandemic, I think some of the commercial properties around the world are kind of suffering, right? The whole demand supply, the demand kind of came down, the supply is still up to raise money to pay off the debt and so on. So there's this balance. Now, of course, for the bigger, the prime properties, no problem, right? There will always be buyers. But for the mid tier, the lower tier guys, I mean, there's not much liquidity for those properties. And then, but now we have the tokenized properties, right? The security token of all these properties.
Yeah.
Now you can create the liquidity, and then you can trade it. So again, from talking to some of the industry insiders, you can get at least something like 8% premium for the same property just by being liquid alone, right? So I think this is just getting started. And then there's tokenized gold, tokenized IP, tokenized intellectual properties. So there's just a lot of new innovation, new business models just coming up. So that's why we are very excited when this crypto exchange begins trading. I think that's something that will put a lot of energy to promote the adoption and more security tokens being traded in Hong Kong.
This was exactly my question. If you're ready with your team to be there, because it's coming, yeah. And you said that you are focusing on this to be ready to be a leader also in this segment.
Yep.
Amazing. We are close to the end of this super interesting, as always, interview. And I wanted to ask you, what are the trends that are interesting to you? I mean, what are you looking? I mean, what the future? We talk about embedded finance this summit. We talk about all the giant players like Apple and Google and Facebook and others. What do you see that excites you, on a global level, not just in the Hong Kong ecosystem?
Yeah. Well, we talk about embedded finance. So there's the extension of that is like banking as a service, right? I mean, there are different players from around the world. They are now offering some very sort of lean, efficient, quick deployment kind of platform. So anybody, right? You don't have to be a bank. You can launch, banking related services. So that's exciting. Because in a way, I think that even put more sort of motivation for the incumbent banks to really sort of transform themselves. So that in itself is very, very interesting, exciting. Now, and going back to what I just said, now, while all these things are great, but then we also look at the fundamentals, because when we think about fintechs, now it's about, I think banking services have been around for a long time. So even I think the quote from Bill Gates a couple of years, in fact, many years ago. So Bill Gates said, I think he made this quote back in the late 90s, to my recollection. So what he said was, when he looked into the future, so the banks, as he knew it back then in the late 90s, might not exist, but banking services will still be around. It's just that they may not be provided by the incumbent banks. So that's what Bill Gates said even back in the late 90s. So in a way, when we think about it, yeah, okay, so the services is that. So what's the difference between the so-called traditional banking services versus the banking services as you see today? And that is the data-driven, mass personalization. We can do a lot more sort of risk assessment down to the level in which in the past you don't have those, credit data. You are stuck as a bank, but now you can use like social data to try to estimate, the risk level. So now it's really a lot of the sort of the innovation today is really enabled by data. So if you don't have data, if you have amazing AI algorithm, it doesn't matter. You need the data. So I think the next big wave that I see is the true breakthrough on the sharing of data in the open data, open banking context. Because it's not just technology, right? It's people willingness to share the data,
That's
right?
true.
So that's something that we are keeping a keen eye on to see how this play out in the rest of the world.
Amazing. Thank you very much. A lot of people, you're for us a friend and a partner and a thought leader and an industry thought leader and I love everything that you and your team is doing. I love the fact that you are looking into other opportunities, other ecosystems, taking part of other conversations, contribute your value everywhere. So these are, from me, my colleagues here in Israel, we see you as a friend. Everybody knows you personally. How can people follow you? What is the best channel to follow your updates and Invest Hong Kong?
Well, you can easily look me up, Invest Hong Kong, King Leung. At the same time, we have a fintech linking page called Fintech HK. This is not just about Invest Hong Kong. As I said, we are just the engine oil. There are a lot of other folks like the HMA, the SFC, the Singapore of the world. They're doing a lot of the heavy lifting too. So we are just basically trying to pull everyone together and try to get the oil to get things move more quickly. So that's why the FinTech LinkedIn page is really for the entire Hong Kong fintech community. So there'll be a lot more news there. So for folks who are interested to follow what's happening, the latest developments in Hong Kong, and by extension, some of the mainland China developments. So you can just follow us on the FinTech LinkedIn page.
Great, and follow you on LinkedIn,
Yep.
and it's always interesting. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next event together.
Great. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to always talk to you. And so again, thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thank you and all your team. See you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Bye bye.